Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today, I would like to address you in regards to jobs, or more specifically, work. And the idea that I'm kind of throwing around in my head right now is a concept that I've been working on for a while in terms of how to establish the work aspects, where it's the actual calculus of the energy unit being put to a proper intended use to engineer outcomes that are desirable. And the concept of, we have a proper capitalism to achieve a proper intended use of achieving welfaring stewardship on a continuum, and we're working towards achieving outcomes of welfaring stewardship, which in essence will result in making America work for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind and everybody lives the good life. And we need to do work to properly engineer for outcomes that achieve that in the many different realms where that needs to be accomplished. So we have to put in the good work in order to make that happen. And work is about doing something that's worthy, putting your talents towards something that is worthy, something that your capabilities can be brought to bear in a situation that needs to have either a resolution or it needs to have some sort of productivity to it. And you're trying to achieve, intended results. And you're initiated by having some sort of proposal of something that needs to be accomplished, and then assessing your capacities, evaluating the situation and the requirements for it, and you kind of figure out how long it will take and what sort of resources, tools, implements, things like that you need in order to accomplish that, what it's going to take to gather and collect all those sorts of things, what sort of transactions need to occur in order for you to accumulate the resource and capital and agency required to accomplish that task, and what sort of other people are you going to have to involve with it. Are you going to need support? These sorts of things. And then taking all those things into consideration, you can kind of write out a job outline to say, in order to do this is what it's going to take, sort of thing. And then bringing that to bear in terms of all right, now initiating it and actually putting in the work and the effort to accomplish it. It's like doing good work to achieve good outcomes because you're good at what you do. And to really emphasize going back to something that I reiterate constantly, I believe that the economy of the future is going to be based off of insights. Insightful people sharing their insights that help us to better understand what needs to be understood when there is a question that arises, and helps us to solve for the query that we have at the moment, sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that we're all just going to be, thinkers. We have to also be doers, because sometimes the answer to something is a living answer, and the only way to give the answer is to do the work that reveals, what that answer is. It's a living answer to those questions. And so when you think of productivity in regards to this, you think of work in terms of this. We have a proper intended use for our economy. Now you got to look at, how do we make sure the right transactions happen and that we're actually achieving what we would say is what we're trying to accomplish. So we need to have metrics, and you measure what you value, but you also get what you measure. And in the way jobs are, calculated now, I don't think it's very insightful for the metrics that we use, because the jobs doesn't necessarily mean that the work that needs to get done is getting done. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the person who's doing the work is getting compensated fairly for what they're doing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's advancing any initiatives in a trajectory that we would want. It's like, is a company in a position enough to be able to bring on more people to help them fulfill and accomplish their missions? Or are they struggling in some regard so that they, have to let people go because, the personnel is always the first thing to go in the chopping block because it's the most liquid of quote unquote assets of a company is the, personnel, human resource asset. And that's supposed to give us an indication of like the health. It's like taking the temperature of the economy. And, while it gives us information, I don't think it necessarily gives us the insight that we need in order to know whether or not we are steering the economy in a direction that we need to go. Again, the whole idea is if we have a proper capitalism, we're trying to achieve a proper intended use through our economy's, functions and operations and efficiencies and these sorts of things. We need to measure more than just, how many jobs were created. It's also about how much has the individual been able to develop their experiential learning through experiential work opportunities that help them to level up their skill base and to enhance their capabilities to make them more of an asset in terms of their capacity to translate their human ingenuity into a capability to achieve an outcome, to help be an engineer of an outcome. And to enhance that in such a regard where it's not just about going out and learning in school these skills, but practically applying these skills and learning on the job, so to speak, like an internship sort of thing, so that we are enhancing the ever renewable resource of human ingenuity to the point where we know from the pool of candidates within our population that we have enough skilled, competent, capable individuals that we could draw upon to help us to solve for things. And I think that's more what we need to be metricing. It's kind of like saying we want to see everybody's, resume, although I don't really like resumes per se, but kind of like be able to draw on knowing that we have helped to cultivate the maximum, capabilities of an individual. Where we might have lost that person to do a job, let's say because it's seasonal work and, you no longer need to work that job. And so we're going to lose a few jobs in that regard. While we might have lost that position for that person to do work in that regard, that's not really indicating a total loss in the economy. It's just a shift in, requirements of befit the times. But what we have gained in society in that regard, which we can, quantify as like a significant gain, is that individual was in that role for a time period and they learned from that role through their experience and they were able to level up their skill base and capabilities. So now they're, much more capable to be of service in other ways that might be similar too, especially if they're able to adapt and cultivate and to refine their skills that are more on the soft skills side, where it's not just hard skills like I know how to run this particular machine or run this particular software in order to fulfill this particular role. It's also the capacity of, my mind is now open to, the malleabilities of understanding how to do things differently than what I had been, trained or, educated, or through, trial and error experience, aware of what was in the realm of possibilities. So you're expanding the capacities of human ingenuity. You're helping that person to be more insightful and resourceful so that when they go in to fulfill another role eventually, they're bringing all of that value that is inherent in them to bear in those new situations. And I think that is the more important metric to, look at. And then it really gets the important, human element, the core of the situation, putting the human at the center of all outcome considerations. What are the people getting out of this? And then in terms of like, well, now that person is well versed and capacitated to serve in this role, in this function, in this capacity, in this way. And now they have been liberated from that particular role, function, to go and serve, to do work in other regards. And so it's looking at it less as like it's a bad thing, that there's some sort of transition between one role to another role, rather seeing, well, this is another level up opportunity. And then, in terms of like actual work, going back to that concept, I really believe that the whole concept of, work and employment in society is just like, the whole metric is absolutely ridiculous. My very first job that I ever had, not the first work that I did, because I've put in a lot of work in my life. I mean, I was an entrepreneur at a very young age. I had a business with my brothers to, go and rake up leaves in people's yards and do small tasks and chores. I was a babysitter, I had paper routes, these sorts of, all kinds of like task sorts of things. But my first real job, where I went and worked for a paycheck in a particular role and I was hired for it, was at the unemployment office. Rather the unemployment side of the employment department. And man, I'll tell you what, you'll learn a lot from that role. And it was very difficult because so many people coming in and sharing their really unfortunate stories of their circumstances and situations in terms of, they didn't ask for this to be brought upon them. And some of them, worked really hard for those companies, gave their best, gave their all. And those companies extracted all this value and gained so much in terms of, gains of profits and benefits for their company and advancements for their company. And then this person was treated like a warm body that filled the position, that was easily disposed of, without consideration for the fact that the company needs to retain its bottom line. But when you eject a human being from your ranks, from that role, for whatever justification that you may or may not have, you're leaving that person in a precarious situation where, unemployment insurance is not, I understand it's a social safety net, it is not enough. It doesn't do what it really should do. And, it's so easy to be rejected from it and to not qualify for it. So it doesn't even apply to everybody. And listening to the stories of people, like, it's actually really demoralizing. Why would you want to go and work for another company when you were just wholly mistreated by this other company? And just discarded like you were nothing. It didn't matter everything that you put in effort-wise. And, even though, you have something to apply onto your resume to say, I've had this skill or whatever, that actually kind of goes against you in a lot of regards, because other companies are looking at you like, well, why were you let go? And then you have to give this whole explanation of justification, when at the end of the day, it's like, I really don't know why I was let go, but this, company found its reasons, and here I am, and I'm in need of another job, and, I just want to put my skills to bear in giving in service, do good work for fair compensation, and bring my talents to bear so I feel that I'm participating and contributing, and so that I can, draw an income for myself to support myself and to support my family, and to, build wealth and to have stability and these sorts of things. And in the current economy and the way employment works, there's no stability to it. You have no control over whether a company is going to keep you on or not. And even when you get approved for unemployment compensation, it's a whole ordeal. It's like a job in itself, and it's very demoralizing. And then if you have to get social safety nets in terms of like, welfare assistance, man, that's a degrading, demoralizing process as well. And it's like having a whole nother job to try to, involve with it. And I get it. People, created these, barriers or whatever to prevent people from just mooching off the system. Totally respect and understand not wanting people to, draw on the benefits of everybody without having to put something in for contribution. It's reasonable to not want a bunch of freeloaders, but in the way society is arranged, most people that draw on those systems are not freeloaders. They're just functionally rendered useless. And it's not that they're incapable, it's not that they don't have value, and it's not that they cannot be, put to work to do amazing things. They have been rendered useless by an economy that is not about ensuring that people have a way to participate and contribute and to help us to accomplish something together, and so that there's always a place for somebody to do good work for fair compensation. It's not about that. It's literally all just about, what company needs what skill to be applied at what time in order for them to, extract value from a person so they can create benefits for themselves and to create more profits for their shareholders. There are some companies that exist that are, employee owned and operated. And in those regards, there's a lot more respect to the job that you're doing because you're getting value in it too. And so that brings me to the idea of what I would really like to see the economy evolve into is something that's kind of like a omnidirectional outcome franchise, where everybody is a relevant stakeholder, everybody has skin in the game, everybody is a part of this cooperative. It's a co-op. But it's franchised in the sense of the Made in America brand is our franchise. And it works in many different directions to achieve the proper intended use of our economy, which is welfare and stewardship. And everybody buys into that ownership of being able to say Made in America, and that franchise, everybody is a member of it. Everybody has stake in the game, everybody has, seat at the table, these sorts of things. And everybody works in an entrepreneurial role in this, franchise aspect of we're the Made in America, economy, and we're working towards, achieving these outcomes together. And then it renders the individual to be themselves able to contract themselves to do the work for these companies, so that when they leave a particular role, they're contracted to do a certain type of job, and then when they leave that role, it's based off of this contract that they've made with this company, and they get to negotiate the terms and the conditions of their employment. It puts the power into the individual who's doing the actual work instead of it always being in the hands of the company. And so the company can't just fire an individual for no frickin' reason at all. There has to be a justification that is, warranted. And that when they break that contract, then something like unemployment insurance would kick in, and not in a regard of, do you or don't you qualify. It's already determined if, you didn't breach your contract, you automatically qualify. And that's just a supplement to, compensate for an early, end to a contract. And then you move on to another role in another job, and it's no longer about, well, why'd you get fired from this job or whatever. It's literally just I'm on a new assignment. I have a new orders, and I'm contracting to fulfill a different role. And the good thing about this is that people can move from one role to another role seamlessly. They're not, bedded down with anybody. If they have a contract with a company and it's just not working out, there's terms and conditions to move out of that contract in, a way that's serving the best interests of everybody. To, maybe I'm not the right fit for this, these sorts of things, but to do so in such a way where it's not based off of punitiveness or, putting people in a precarious situation and treating people like they're just warm bodies to fill a position. It's literally mutual respects, mutual interests, mutual benefits, mutual securities, to make sure that, in this mutualism, everybody is benefiting for us doing what is right, given the circumstances of the situation. And to evolve into our different roles as we need to apply. And the great thing about this is that now we have an entire talent pool of every person in America that is a part of this, that can be drawn upon at any point in time to fulfill a role. And it's easy to seamlessly move somebody in and out of a role, and to understand their skill base based off of, an individual's, better than a resume. Is just like this whole profile of the profound skills and talents and capabilities that this person has. And for them to offer that in a contract, in kind of like a bid for, to fulfill this role sort of thing. And then, fostering an economy that's based off of, we no longer have, the legacy standard of, lifelong careers in some jobs and companies. Sure, that does exist still to some degree, but now it's more like, people evolve and move in and out of jobs all of the time. But what this does in the regard of creating an entrepreneurship of sorts, and then people contracting, we're all a part of this, franchise that's a cooperative franchise. Everybody benefits as the economy benefits, and this gives us a basis to do, a thing that I've talked about before in terms of an employee compensation package, so to speak, modeled off of the pay that we do for military in terms of having a base pay, a BAS pay, and hazard pay, these sorts of things, to make sure that everybody has what they need in order to maintain the basics of life. But then to also have access to resources that we can, as a cooperative, increase the amount of, evolve and improve the circumstances of, to make sure that we have things that are beneficial, like universal health care, universal child care, paid sick leave and family leave, and new parent leave, these sorts of things. All of those compensations that we all benefit from, we all have access to, we are all, able to draw from, because we are members of this cooperative franchise, and we increase the value of that and the capacity of that to increase its benefits to us all collectively, based off of the more productive we become, the more we're able to, improve that circumstance, in that benefit. But then everybody being able to work in their own individual way as individual independent entrepreneurs. That's why it's kind of like a franchise. Everybody does their own thing in their own role, and everybody, increases their talents, and we have this amazing talent pool to be able to draw from, across the board, and then creating a situation where people don't have to hunker down in one place and, be there and live there forever if they don't want to. They can if they want to. But also opens up a great opportunity to make it so people are more malleable and mobile, and so you can move from one place to another, and to create such a societal operation in terms of our infrastructure development, our housing, and these sorts of things, to make it so that people can, move in and out of communities and towns, and in such a way that I think would really help us to better understand each other and be more sympathetic to each other's differences, and to be able to experience new and wonderful places, and help us to, be more cohesive and whatnot, but also at the same time have capacity for people to establish roots in the communities that they find that are most compelling for themselves. But also open up the door, because, maybe where you started isn't where you're gonna finish. Maybe where you're at now isn't where you necessarily belong, and over time you'll be able to find, that there's somewhere else that you're meant to be, that to best be of service and to live, your best life. We need to create the opportunity for people to have the chance to discover that. And if we have, jobs per se that, you're contracting yourself, you can go anywhere at any time. It's kind of like what they have for the, work from home, or the, digital nomad, work from home worker. They can go anywhere and work as long as they have a computer and internet connection or whatever. Emphasize that into the regard, well, you can do that with a lot of different types of jobs. And then this also puts us in a position of where we don't always have to concern ourselves deeply with, you have to have gone through school and have certain types of, rubber stamps of a diploma in order to fulfill a role, because sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that you are best suited to accomplish that task. There are some roles that need special certification, and we definitely need to, create opportunities for people to go into, the right accredited courses to get that, accreditation in certification, in diplomas and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way for every role. And some people can learn through experience, especially in terms of like internships and things like that. And then in that process, also supplement it with the, in-course education to achieve that diplomacy. So you're getting the experiential learning as well as the dedicated book work to understand the fine intricacies of the theory of that particular role. And enhancing this in a sense of also bringing into it, we need to start preparing people for this new way of being employed. We need to create makers malls in replacement of our traditional schools. Our legacy schools should be intentionally evolved out and replaced with the new concept of a makers mall. Makers mall is essentially a school for everyone to learn through experience, and based off of what your interests are and what your talents are. There's still like, basic curriculum, things that you have to learn. Everybody has to learn these basics like reading, writing, arithmetic, these sorts of things. But also expanding on leveling up in certain areas and doing it based off of your interests and your talents and what you want to cultivate, and to try new things out that help you to discover where you can best serve and where your talents are, your innate skills and talents can be brought out. And so establishing this type of education system that everybody learns together, no matter what age group you're in, what level of competency you're in, everybody learns together at their own pace, but in a similar way under the same circumstances of, it's kind of like, I made a video on it before in terms like a mall, and instead of it being a store, is just a different experiential learning opportunity. And you go through the door and you learn different things in that area, and everybody learns together and learns from each other and helps level up each other's understanding about something so that you can reach expert level. There's still teachers, but we kind of are all teaching each other and learning from each other, and doing it where it's not, age-based or grade-based. It's more like individuated leveling up of your mastery of craft in a particular area or whatever. And then that's brought to bear in terms of like your, I don't like the word resume, I don't like the concept of resume, but like a resume, it's like your whole entire profile. It says, this is my skill level in this area or this area. It's kind of like a video games. One of my favorite anime movies is Sword Art Online, which that video game essentially, spoiler alert for the movie, like the individuals in that game can level up personal skills in different areas based off of what their interests are. And then you can see what that skill level is in each one of those areas. A lot of games have this type of profiling. And so I think that that's where resumes need to go to in the future, where schooling needs to go in the future, was not based off of grades or whatever. And then everybody learns together, so we don't have to worry about the concept of, certain people not, certain schools being better than other schools and these sorts of things. And it's not to say that people can't still have like private schools if that's what they want, but I believe public schools should be a welcoming place for everybody, and it should be a space for everybody to come and learn together, and that there's no barriers and there's no borders to that. And it is something that is a public, universal, basic innovation that everybody can derive benefits from. It's a mutualism and a resource commons that helps everybody to level up. And so if for some reason you leave a role in a job and you no longer want to pursue that particular type of tasking and work, you can go back into the Maker's Mall and learn and upskill yourself in that regard, so that then you can say, I have the experiential proof that I know how to do this job in this particular way. And then you open yourself up to more pools of opportunity for different types of contracts that you can take, and just leveling that up over time. And again, it puts the individual in the power of their own determinations of what type of work that they get to do. It also helps companies to know that they're not on lockdown forever with a particular individual. And it also makes a mutual respect between an employer and, the individual who is doing the work. There's so many benefits to it. But again, this creates the paradigm by which, we can justify a mutual compensation package that everybody benefits from, that essentially compels people to want to be active participants and contributors to society so they can be a part of this and draw benefit from, and that everybody participates and contributes in their own way, and we know that whatever they contribute is of value because it's achieving these welfare and stewardship outcomes that we've all agreed this is our national purpose, this is our national identity, this is our mission, what we're trying to achieve together. And there's many different ways to get there, and the many different ways that we need to contribute to get there. So it doesn't matter what you're contributing as long as it is part of achieving these welfare and stewardship outcomes. It's not to say that like an artist or a musician or a movie star, or a news anchor or something like that isn't participating, contributing to that, because they're not building up something that is an innovation that helps us to achieve one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is part of the welfare and stewardship framework, because they're adding value in terms of roots and culture that helps us to make sure that our experience, our lived experience, is thriving, that we're prospering, that we're living a happy, healthy life, that we're learning from ourselves and from each other, and that we are enjoying this experience. That is a big part of it too. And then this also makes sure that we start fairly compensating caregiving in society. We actually recognize the value of that, and that caregivers who are oftentimes now in society doing hard work, the hardest work in society, and they're doing it without compensation. And it puts them in a precarious situation. It makes them actually not as able to be good caregivers. This solves for that problem by making sure, well, you're a part of it too. You're value adding to our capacity to achieve the, engineering of these welfare and stewardship outcomes. And so therefore you are a part of, the network of, the co-op, and you too can, draw on these benefits that are available to everybody, because we see your value, we see your contribution, we see your participation, and we're grateful for it. And it starts putting real tangible metrics on the values that society has long ignored. And to for instance, the concept of it's really difficult to become a parent. It's very expensive to be a parent, and most families need to be a 2-income household, and so having one parent stay home with the children is really hard to do, and that makes it difficult for people to grow their families. And now we have a population decline, and this isn't so good. So this type of arrangement of having like a cooperative franchise for the Made in America brand helps to actually make it so that stay-at-home parents they're caregivers. That's value adding roles in society, and as such they can also draw from these benefits as well. And when we do it that way, it's no longer about what capitalists think is important, and then they create the companies, and then that creates the jobs, and that determines what we're going to do, and then that determines who's going to have value and be able to get work in the society, and leaving it all in the hands of these people who ultimately at the end of the day, the bottom line is all they really care about. That's why they can't solve problems, why we have so many social problems, is because you can't leave it to capitalism to take care of it. You can't certainly make it wholly dependent on the government either. It needs to be a public-private partnership, and then that partnership also has to include the individual. And when you have a proper intended use of the economy, and we have something that's kind of like a cooperative franchise that is the Made in America brand, and that's everybody is a part of that, and we recognize the value of every value additive role that people have in society. Now it's no longer about what a company or corporation decides we should be working on. It's rather all of us recognizing, we're working towards welfare and stewardship outcomes. I see a need, I fill a need, and you're deriving work in that regard. And that shows, we're actually adding value to the economy in this regard. And this is important because then we can accomplish the tasks of, I see in communities we have a lot of people that are, hard sleeping on the street, or they're living in tents on the street, and, everybody deserves a safe home space, and, it's really an unsightly thing, and actually, makes our cities appeal to be in decline, and, could result in, unsafe conditions for those individuals in that precarious situation and anybody else in that area. And it might result in those people making bad life decisions because they're exposed to, their vulnerabilities expose them to bad actors with nefarious intent preying on them, on their vulnerabilities and their weaknesses. And so it is perpetuating the opportunity for bad actors with nefarious intent to come in and to do things that are actually against, law and order and domestic order. So we need to solve for that in advance in a proactive, preventative way. And the best way to do that is to, make sure everybody has a safe home space. Well, how do we solve for that? You're not going to have a big corporation that's going to come in and say, I'm going to make a large company that's going to solve for this thing, because where are you making your money from? So there are some things that need to be done that isn't about making profits for a company and shareholders. It has to be about improving the circumstances of life so that overall we are all benefiting from the fact that this problem that is a social crisis, a health crisis, is resolved for in the most humane and decent way possible, to the point where we could be proud of how we solved for that, because it wasn't dehumanizing. It was actually uplifting, and it was saying, like, we just need to level up these people's lives, and bring them back into the fold and give them opportunities, and they're part of the franchise co-op too. They can do work, and they're valuable, and we just have to put it in a situation where it's like a lot of those people can't go out and just find a job anywhere, because first of all, you need to have an address to have a job, and you need to have a phone number to have a job, and people need to think that you're stable to have a job, and like all these things that are barriers to them getting work, and that is, kind of done away with, because it's just like, we need some support in this particular area to accomplish this project that we have initiated to serve for, good welfare and outcomes. And, you're a capable individual. We would like to invite you into contract to help us to fulfill this role. And in return for that, we're going to give you fair compensation, and you are automatically, a part of our, cooperative franchise, and that means that you get to draw on these great, compensation benefits that everybody is, able to draw upon. And then the good thing is that not everybody's going to draw on the same thing at the same time in the same way. And so while these people might need, to draw on the benefits here a little bit, somebody else doesn't need that. They need to draw on benefits somewhere else. And that's why the system works, is because it's kind of like the concept of abundance. Not everybody wishes for the same thing. And so, of course, the universe can comply with that which, through the law of attraction, you say is yours and that you need, and that see a need, fill a need is not going to be the same for everybody, because everybody has different wants, everybody has different needs at different times. And so we can fulfill those sorts of roles. And there's, in that movement, that transaction of the energy unit itself, there's ways to capitalize on the efficiencies in those systems of just perfect timing, to the point where we could afford to take care of all of these things. It's kind of like the concept of, not all your bills come out at the same exact time. And so therefore you can afford to pay your bills, because it's going to take time to earn enough to be able to pay those bills. And, Your pay comes in and then you pay parts of your bills, and your next pay comes in and you pay the other parts of your bills. It's not all due at once. And so that efficiency that can be created in the system of transaction, helps us to be able to afford to make sure that everybody can draw on these benefits, and then holding people to account and responsible, like, don't waste, waste not, want not. And you can really instill that in the practice of what you're drawing upon. It's like, only take that what you need. The concept of there's enough for everybody's need, not enough for man's greed. So really working with that, but it's recognizing everybody has something they can participate and contribute, recognize the value additive capacities of individuals, what they're bringing to the situation that helps everybody to make this a situation we can thrive on. It's very much like the concept of stone soup. Great story. It's like, you start off with a single stone, and then everybody's like, well, I have this ingredient I can add. Another person has another ingredient you can add. Another person has another ingredient to add. And suddenly something that was as simple as water in a pot with a stone in it has turned into this wonderful, delicious, fulfilling stew that everybody can share collectively together. It's a resource commons. It's kind of like the potluck effect, right? Like, everybody making one dish, that one dish may not be enough to feed 100 people, but 100 people bringing one dish is more than enough to feed everybody, right? And then you got lots of options. And, and everybody brings their part and their unique flavors into it, and it makes it not just be, something to eat, but it makes it a meal that, and a happy meal you get to share with people. It's a great thing. And I think by looking at our economy as something like that, looking at our compensation packages as something like that, look at jobs and work about, fulfilling tasks in these roles that are necessary for now to achieve the objectives of a particular project that's been initiated to achieve a certain welfare and stewardship outcome that has been engineered for. And doing so in such a way where it's not about making profits, it's about making a difference. But yes, we do make profits in the process as well, because, that's what happens when you have transaction. And doing so in such a way where the objective is about having the good outcomes, and to make sure that we're doing so in such a way that it's not disadvantaging people and it's not an ecological offense. We're doing the right thing for the right reasons in the right ways, the right time. So I really would like to have more people think about the economy in this regard, see the potential in that. It wouldn't be able to be an automatic shift. That's why I constantly say we need to have an auxiliary economy that helps us to start working in this realm to bring the energy unit onto this new trajectory. And then build a scaffolding between the legacy economics into the new proper capitalism economics, and to make sure that there's an abridgment between that, so that we're not losing any of the things that are of genuine, authentic value, and then give the opportunity for companies to pivot and shift without having to bear the full blow, because we don't want them to fail. We want them to succeed. We just want them to make sure that their outcomes are also in alignment with welfare and stewardship, too. And, be able to get to the point where we're all moving in the same direction together. And the auxiliary economy gives us a way to shift away. It lessens the burden, and then allows for people to make those shifts in a calculated fashion, and it gives constancy that companies can bet on. And then bringing in our tax-based system that helps to incentivize that, but also creates penalties for people who are unwilling to go in that direction because of their selfish desire to maintain the status quo. The point is the status quo has to go because it's not benefiting everybody. But we don't want to leave those people behind who are stubbornly going to, cling on to the status quo as much as they can. We want to get to a point where they will see that it is much more beneficial for them to make the shift than it is for them to try to keep things the same, and to welcome them into a situation they can thrive on and help them to pivot, help them to divest in the things that are moving out of alignment with what we have collectively decided as welfare and stewardship outcomes, our objective. Help them to divest from that, and then to reinvest in new ways, and to make that shift, and to help them to do so in such a way that say, yeah, you might take a little hit right now in terms of what you're getting in profits, but you're going to gain so much more in the end that it's going to be a good thing. And it's a good thing for everybody, because now you don't have to worry about society falling apart around you, because there's going to be an eventual point in time, if we maintain the status quo, that it ends up in dissolution. Everything will fall apart because it does not have integrity right now. And expedient fixes aren't going to solve for that. And keeping things the way that they are is creating a chasm of inequality that will prevent people from being able to participate and contribute to economy. And you're going to have less, money movements for you to be able to draw on. The markets are going to start to fall apart, and you're not going to have, it doesn't matter what sort of scheme for capturing money that you might be able to create for your company. If there is a significant fallout of people from being able to participate in that economy, eventually you're just going to be fighting for the last few scraps of something. We want to be able to move away from that scarcity paradigm into one that is an abundance paradigm. That, again, there's enough for everybody's need, not enough for anybody's greed. So it has to be in a way that's mutualisms, mutual benefits, mutual securities, mutual interests, and does so in such a way that helps us to transition smoothly into automation increasing in society, and a lot of these jobs being taken over by our automated robotics and artificial intelligent counterparts that take over those roles and then liberate us to be able to take risks for higher things. But to transition human talent into those sorts of things that people are better suited to do, so that we're not losing out on jobs as they're calculated right now, but we're rather shifting our roles to still accomplish the things that need to be accomplished. But now our hands are liberated from having to do those tasks that are meant to be automated, and we can focus on other things. That's important to do, and is in such a way where nobody's getting left behind. And actually, especially when we bring the tax-based system into an incentivization of that shift, in terms of having welfaring stewardship tasks that everybody pays into, which is kind of like a membership fee for this franchise, and everybody has access to the resources because of their contribution into that. And then we have a portions tax that essentially says, your portion of helping to make the pivot shift in these ways that we need to is going to give you a set amount of, beneficial gains down the line, in terms of, if you benefit now and you pay taxes and you help to create innovations to shift us to accomplish these initiative, projects now, you will in return have a lower tax base that's drawn upon, and you can eventually it's something workable in terms of like the energy unit that people can, bank on, especially large corporations, to say, well, I'm investing in this now, which means that I'm going to get the return on investment, the what's in it for me factor by year 3, that says, well, because I invested in, getting this accomplished, I was an active participant and contributor to that, my tax base goes down, a percentage point or something, and that's significant for a company, especially in terms of, like, if I know in year 3 I'm going to have a lower percentage point, I'm going to be able to plot and plan ahead that I'm going to have, the deployment of a particular innovation from my company at that time point, so that I'm going to be able to capture a whole lot more profits, because I'm going to have to pay less in taxes. But I'm paying less in taxes not because some system has been rigged to my favor, because I paid off a politician that helped me to get a lower tax rate, but rather, like, I did what was necessary in order to justify me earning that lower interest rate, and the amount that I have to pay in taxes. And so when you look at it that way, it gives a functionality to economy that we don't have right now, that would actually be able to help us to, engineer for outcomes and do so together, and everybody benefits in such a way where not everybody's benefit the same way, but everybody's benefiting in the ways that matter to them, so that they can accomplish their good work and to grow from that, benefit that everybody can count on, So with that, I'm going to in this conversation, but I'm grateful for your valuable time, attention, and consideration in regards to this, and I hope that it has opened your mind to consider this possibilities and the potentials that are there in terms of like, it's not going to be an easy overnight sort of thing, but there is so much that we can collectively, mutually benefit from in this regard, and I think that it will help us to solve a lot of the uncertainties that society is facing right now. It's like, what do we do about automation and AI, and what do we do about jobs are in decline? What do we do about the fact that we're not able to do manufacturing? What about the fact that we don't have enough right now to be able to do the refinements of natural resources and do to refinement so that it's an actual usable a resource for us to put into manufacturing, such as like rare earth minerals, to process them appropriately so they can be used. We can build up that, because that could be part of our initiatives and projects. We need to get this done and contract the right people to be able to do that. And it's like, oh, we're going to need more of this down the line, so we're going to have to create an entire channeling of people through a make or small education system that prepares them for that, and sets them up to be able to be of service at the right time when we're going to need on them, and for them to be welcomed into that and be able to just walk in to fulfill those roles in such a way where they have control over the situation in terms of like a negotiating stance to say, well, I'm worth this because I can bring this to the table, and then also the companies say, well, with a little bit more refinement, a little bit more education, a little bit more experience for you, we could cultivate your talents that we could up level together, and it's going to be beneficial for us, and so you can invest in the improvement of individuals. Like that type of stuff is what we're creating in the realm of possibilities, and now our scenario universe is becoming expansive. It's like you see potential everywhere in everybody and everything, and then you see how we're all working together, and so it's no longer pit against side, and it's no longer us versus them, and it's just really literally about how can we make this work and who can fulfill these roles, because we got to get this stuff done together, and just do a call to service for everybody and to get these things done, but again in such a way where we're making sure that it works for everybody without the disadvantage of anybody, so nobody gets left behind or kept behind. Everybody lives a good life. We're doing it through spontaneous cooperation, and we're making sure that we're not doing it with ecological offense, so that we can maintain our status as welfaring stewards. We are stewarding people, planet, communities, civilization, society, and we're doing it for a reason, proper intended use. We want to make sure that we secure the good life for everybody, because our secure situation depends on the secure situation of other people, and so we all have stake in the game. We are all relevant planetary stakeholders, and we should all be looked at as such. We are all resources. The most abundant renewable resource on the planet is human ingenuity, and we need to take advantage of that in such a way that is mutually beneficial. So with that, again, thank you for your valuable time, consideration, and until next time, be well.